What's up, everybody? Mike Renner here, joining you on today's episode of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. I'm alongside Kyle Long, Brian McFadden, and as always, we're going to be bringing you the matchups to watch for every single big game in the Week 16 slate. But before we get to those, we're going to start off with some bold predictions. We like to come in hot, set the tone for a good show for you guys. So, B-Mac, I'm going to toss it to you. What kind of heat do you got for us in Week 16 here?
I got a big bowl of fire for you guys in terms of heat. You talk about being bold. Well, my bold prediction will involve a player making his very first professional start in Michael Penix Jr. Of course, we all heard the news. They demoted Kirk Cousins. They went and promoted Michael Penix, making his first start against the New York Giants at home in Atlanta. My bold prediction is Michael Penix will throw at the bare minimum 300 yards, and he will have a total of 4 touchdowns in his very first professional start. In a must-win situation, Michael Penix will deliver a must-win individual performance in terms of his first start. Like I said, throw at least 300 yards. He will have a total of 4 touchdowns in his first NFL debut. Let's go, Michael Penix.
I love that. Mike, what you got for your bold prediction, man?
Well, I was gonna react to B-Max because he did. Okay. He set the tone. He came out hot, and everyone knows Michael Penix Jr. making his first start.
That's hot.
I love it because this is an offense that has been on the precipice of getting to that elite status all year. Like, the talent is there. When you watch how Zach Robinson schemes it up, I think he's been tremendous in doing so all year long. But just he's been hampered by the fact that there are areas of the football field for this Atlanta Falcons offense that are just off limits with Kirk Cousins and his arm strength. And there are plays in the playbook that without his mobility are also off limits. So you go from one of the weak quarterbacks in the NFL to now one of the strongest in Michael Penix Jr. I know it looks funky as a lefty, but the dude's got a cannon. You go from one of the most immobile quarterbacks in the NFL in Kirk Cousins to a guy who ran a 4.58 at his pro day in Michael Penix Jr. There are options now in this offense that just weren't available. And with all these rookie quarterbacks having success early on, and one of them I'll get to in my bold prediction, but Michael Penix Jr. played the most ball of them. He was a 6-year guy in college. All the other guys were 5 years, 4 years, 3 years. He was there for 6 years, whether it was at Indiana, Washington, and is now marinated on the bench in this offense for 15 weeks. I think he hits the ground running. Now, will it be 304 touchdowns? I'm not sure I'm ready to go that far, but I think this offense looks considerably better, I'll say, with Michael Penix Jr. at the helm. What do you think of that, Kyle?
Mike, I mean, first off, B-Mac, that's fantastic. That's how you get things started with a bold prediction. I can't wait to see this Atlanta offense with Michael Penix Jr. And we've talked about the arm deficiency there with Kirk Cousins as being the thing that's really holding this offense back. But I love what Mike touched on there with the mobility of Michael Penix Jr. Because as an offensive lineman, I understand that if there is that certain statuesque quarterback back there at the quarterback position, you're not going to be able to have all of the protections, the movement protections at your disposal. You get Michael Penix in there, you can really give hard action to one side of the line of scrimmage. You can make the defense feel you. And there's always that threat of Michael Penix booting out, getting outside. And also being a left-hander, everything's backwards for the defense, B-Mac. You understand that. For righties, you understand they're going to leak out to the offense's right. But with this left-handed quarterback, you're going to be looking at unique launch points. I fully anticipate Michael Penix having a really good first outing.
All right, I'm going to go to my next because, like I said, it also involves a rookie quarterback. I think Caleb Williams against the Detroit Lions has the best game of his NFL career. 2 reasons for this, 2 big ones. First one, obviously, we know the Detroit Lions and their injury issues. I'm going to go ahead and read to you guys the sheer number of guys missing from this Detroit Lions defense. It started off with John Kaminsky. He was the first one to hit IR, one of their defensive linemen. Then Marcus Davenport, Derek Barnes, Alex Anzalone, Enos Rakes-Straw, Malcolm Rodriguez, Carlton Davis now, Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson, Mekhi Wingo. It's unbelievable. You cannot overcome what they have on that side of the football. We saw it last week against the Buffalo Bills. And the other part of this, Caleb Williams, his splits, home versus road this season, have been massive. Some of the biggest of any quarterback in the NFL. His PFF grade at home this year, 72.9. On the road, 52.8. He goes from a competent, quality NFL starting quarterback at home to a disaster on the road. Well, good news is this one's in Soldier. Those two reasons, I think, go to my brain says Caleb Williams having the best game of his NFL career. What do you think about that one, Kyle? That one.
I think they're going to absolutely need it. And thank you, Mike, for a little good news, on a Thursday morning, because all I've heard is bad things about Caleb Williams and people throwing out his record as a starter as an indicator of the quality of play. And I just point the finger at a couple of these other rookie quarterbacks that ended up being Hall of Famers, Peyton Manning and guys of that like. Also, if you want to talk about wins as a quarterback stat, then Joe Burrow must not be a very good quarterback either. But as it pertains to what you're saying, it is very, very crucial that this team is at home. It's a huge thing. And obviously the injuries to the Detroit Lions, you're going to need that kind of productions out of Caleb Williams if you want to match that production of this Detroit Lions juggernaut of an offense, because regardless of how many people are injured on the defensive side of the ball, they are still rolling, and Ben Johnson's still got a headset on. Jared Goff's still under center, and this Lions offense is as dangerous as ever. So if you want to have a chance, Caleb's going to have a field day, which leads me to my next point. Field days. Yeah. You know who's going to have a field day? Saquon freaking Barkley against the Washington Commanders. And there's a number of reasons for this. First and foremost, you got to understand that at the beginning of the season, with Jaden Daniels taking the world by storm, people were talking about him being the best player in the NFC East, let alone they had him in the Rookie of the Year conversation from the very beginning. But I heard rumblings of MVP. Well, this guy, Saquon Barkley, he knows he's not going to win the MVP. So now it's the NFC East MVP. That's what it comes down to. And this guy's going to come out there rolling. They're going to hand him the football a number of times. And we know it only takes a few for this guy to get up there. I think he goes for $175. And he hasn't been the numbers haven't been gaudy recently, but we've also seen a different looking Philadelphia Eagles offense. They've thrown the football, they've involved other stars, but this is the NFC East, baby. You got to pound the rock, keep the ball out of that other superstar's hands. That's Jaden Daniels. Keep the ball out of his hands. How are you going to do that? Sustain long drives, give the ball to Saquon Barkley, and let him chop the tree down. Dan Quinn's defense, they struggle against the run, and we know that they want to expose the weaknesses of that Commanders team, and I fully anticipate the offense to lean heavily on Saquon Barkley as they have so many times before.
And that would be right on cue with Saquon, because to your point, the last few weeks he's been rather quiet. So we're looking for that Los Angeles Rams-like performance, breaking off a few 50 or 60-yard runs. And to your point as well, Kyle, that has been an issue for the Commanders defensively in terms of run defense. You're playing against one of the more explosive running backs in the National Football League, one of the best offensive line units in the National Football League. And don't forget, in terms of what the Philadelphia Eagles are looking, it's not just about their division. They have that division. They're trying to get the number one spot. So the sense of urgency should be there for them from start to finish, knowing right now they're chasing the Detroit Lions. When you look at the Detroit Lions, to your point, Mike, I think it will be a back and forth affair with Detroit and Chicago because of everything you alluded to. Chicago, they're a much better offense at home. And then with all the injuries on the defensive side for the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff, his offense will be forced to score points. So you never know what that can happen, how that can shake out. But for Philly, you got to get things going. Do not play around with your food. Get off to a fast start. And if you want to give Saquon the opportunity to put forth MVP-like numbers, he is ready to do so. So I'm right there with you, Kyle.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but I think we sat here a month and a half ago in this same studio that we're in, obviously being the 3 box. And you said that Saquon was going for 175 against the Washington Commanders. That was your bold prediction. And I laughed at it. I said, 175?
What did he have, Mike?
He's going to go.
What did he have, Mike?
He was at like 140 midway through the fourth quarter, and I'm over here texting you like, oh my God, what did I sweating that one? He ended up with 146 in that game against the Washington Commanders. But I will say Jonathan Allen designated for return this week. Now, I don't know if he plays. That's obviously the Washington Commanders defensive tackle. If he does play, that'll be a massive help for this Commanders defense, getting healthy, getting back at the right time, because obviously Marshawn Lattimore came back last week. But I do agree, if there's a mismatch of where the Eagles' strength matches up against the Commanders' weakness, it's that O-line flexing on that Washington Commanders defensive line. They're going to pound the rock again in this game the same way they did the last game. So if I were to rank these based off of most likely to come true this weekend, I think the Packers fan in me has to say Saquon 1, Penix 2, and then Caleb 3. Unfortunately, have to give my own as number 3. But those are our bold predictions. After this, we're going to get into Steelers-Ravens, big AFC North matchup, going to be hitting the biggest ones to watch in that game. We got a massive AFC North divisional matchup this weekend. Steelers, Ravens, obviously the divisional crown still up in play with this one. Some big injuries to note, though, on the Pittsburgh side of the football. George Pickens didn't practice yesterday with that hamstring. TJ Watt limited yesterday with that foot injury he suffered a week ago. If they don't have those two, I mean, you can almost close the book on this one before it starts. Unfortunately, those guys are that important to this Pittsburgh Steelers team. So I think everyone's hoping we get to see them just because of we want to see both teams at their best. But B-Mac, what matchups will you be watching in this one?
Well, to your point, you talked about TJ Watt and, being limited today. If he is able to go, clearly, guys, he won't be close to being 100%. It would be some issues with that ankle foot injury that he's dealing with. So the matchup that I'm watching, can the Steelers defensive front pass rushers be able to be effective against Lamar without TJ being at his best? The thing about Lamar and why he struggled so much against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2-5 is his win-loss record against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A guy who's thrown 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. The reason why he struggles is because they have the ability to put relentless pressure on Lamar Jackson, led by the guy you see there in TJ Watt. 17 career sacks against the Ravens, right? In 7 total career games for Lamar Jackson, he's been sacked 22 times when facing the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why they've been so dominant against Lamar Jackson. That's why other teams oftentimes struggle against Lamar Jackson, because they don't have the pass rushers that can put outstanding pressure on him for 4 quarters. Pittsburgh have had the ability to do so. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith Jr., Nick Herbig, and then you add Preston Smith into the fold. You're talking about 4 legit pass rushers led by one of the best pass rushers in the National Football League. But if TJ is not the TJ that we've seen in years past against the Baltimore Ravens, can the others step up to the plate and bring in a solo home run? That remains to be seen, because if they're not able to do that, we're going to see MVP like in Lamar Jackson show up. And that's something that we've never seen from Lamar Jackson in his career against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
B-Mac, I love that matchup. And obviously, I'm partial to have this protection conversation as an offensive lineman. And when you've got a guy like TJ Watt, it doesn't matter what you throw at him, 1, 2, or 3 dudes, he's going to find a way to get into that vision. And if you can change Lamar's eye line, if you can get him more concerned with the pocket than the progression, you could be looking at a really frustrating day for Lamar Jackson and this offense. So much is predicated on his ability to stay alive with the football, looking down the field, regardless of the chaos going around him. If TJ Watt's on the field, I fully anticipate chaos. But if TJ Watt is out there in a limited capacity, and that's what we're talking about here with that ankle, I fully anticipate this Baltimore Ravens offense to go right at the head of the snake, and that is TJ Watt. And you do so in the run game. You challenge him physically with double teams, triple teams, cut blocks, cross formation, tight ends, getting him to have his head on the swivel, just like I was talking about with Lamar Jackson, B-Mac.
And the big thing about Watt is that he's going up against, I don't want to say the weak link, because Roger Rosengarten's been great actually of late for the Baltimore Ravens, but a rookie nonetheless, a rookie second round pick going up against TJ Watt. It's like, good luck, dude. If you're left on an island at all in that game. And why Watt is so impactful as a rusher is that he is such a tough guy to deal with, because he's that true edge bender, that guy that gets to the top of the pocket. You feel like you're in a good position, but then all of a sudden he's really the flexibility in his lower half. Exactly. He's never out of it and gets to the top of the pocket and then bends it all the way back. So you think you got him, lulls you into this false sense of security, and then all of a sudden he's at the back arm of that quarterback swiping it away. So that's massive if they don't have him, but I do agree with BMAC that the Steelers are uniquely qualified. If there's any team in the NFL that can deal with losing someone like TJ Watt, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, because of how impactful Nick Herbig has been in that third edge rusher role, and the fact that they have Preston Smith there as well. So if Watt isn't fully healthy, Early downs, I expect it to be Preston Smith, right? I think he's the guy you want as a run defender to match up against all that the Baltimore Ravens have in the running game. And then third downs, Nick Herbig, he still provides that juice, still provides that guy who can really get to the top of the pockets and make those game-changing forced fumbles to where I still think the Steelers can win it even without TJ Watt. On the other side, though, if they don't have George Pickens, I'm not sure they win this game without George Pickens just because of how crucial that matchup is for George Pickens against these Ravens defensive backs and the fact that I'm not sure I trust anyone else on this Pittsburgh Steelers team to consistently win those one-on-ones on the outside. What do you think of that matchup, B-Mac?
And that's the concern. And the thing is, Mike, we saw the lack of playmakers for Pittsburgh become an issue last week against Philadelphia. See, when you're in this time of the season, when you're playing against good on good, usually teams offensively, they have playmakers they can rely on, right? And it's your job to match their playmakers. What we saw last week, the playmakers for Philly showed up. A.J. Brown, even though you didn't get Saquon-like ball games, he still provided a spark. Devontae, right? When you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers against Philly, they didn't have any playmakers show up. George Pickens has been their best playmaker. And when George Pickens is not on the football field, especially when you're playing against a real high-powered-like offense, like they will see this weekend in the Baltimore Ravens, who's next? Like, if we had to really sit here and debate outside of George Pickens, who is the next best playmaker for the Pittsburgh Steelers on the offensive side, we would really be in a conundrum on thoughts because we don't know. I mean, maybe the next best player probably would be Jaylen Warren.
That's what I was going to say. I think Warren, but it's like that's your second string running back at this point. So,
but that's the difference, though, B-Mac and Mike. You got like Russell Wilson gives George Pickens a chance, and he could come down with the football. With these other playmakers on the offensive side for the Steelers, you have to be damn near perfect as a quarterback. You not only have to make the right read, but you got to put that ball exactly where it's supposed to be, B-Mac. And you understand this better than anybody. You play some guys and you come back to the sideline and your coach says, hey, they get paid too for a reason. And then there's some guys that you play against and your coach gives you a high five and say he never had a chance. Well, with George Pickens, they always have a chance. With these other guys, they got to play this football game out. Russell's got to be pretty damn near perfect.
Yeah, and to your point, it puts more stress on Russell to be almost perfect playing against a high-level playoff caliber defense in the Baltimore Ravens at home. So to your point, that's an issue for me because now we're starting to really see the inability for Pittsburgh to make a splash move like they were trying to do at the wide receiver position surface. Throughout this season, they've been able to get by because, of course, you had GP and everything has been working. But the depth, the lack thereof has always been a concern for me. Even though you traded for Mike Williams, we haven't seen him. We don't know what's going on with his status in terms of being more involved offensively. But outside of that, like Jaylen Warren is probably the next best playmaker. And get this, he is the backup running back to Najee. He's not even a starter. So the opportunities or the lack thereof is an issue for him to show what type of playmaker he could be.
So do we think that Russell Wilson can overcome that? Like, can he create himself a little against this Ravens secondary? Because as much as this Ravens secondary has been maligned, they're still a unit that is willing to put those guys out on an island. And we saw in the Buffalo game, when they have lesser wide receivers they're faced against, they can win those one-on-ones. But it's when they face a Jamar Chase, when they face a George Pickens that they don't adjust well enough, and all of a sudden you see them running wild in that secondary and making big plays down the football field. So if Pickens can't go, can Russell somehow and Arthur Smith, can they cobble together something, whether it's schematically, whether it's Russell himself making plays outside of structure? B-Mac, do we see that as even a possibility, or is it just, man, they're going to have to lean on this run game heavily and have their defense win them one?
I think now that's the thing, Mike, Kyle. How much do you really trust the run game as well? Because they didn't do anything last week against the Eagles. Now, the Eagles collectively, they're a better defensive unit than the Baltimore Ravens. But if you catch Baltimore on the wrong day, that defense can look like a legit competitor given some of the personnel pieces they have. So to answer your question, Mike, I think schematically speaking is the best weapon for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You might want to utilize tempo as well, because when you're short-manned on the offensive end and you're missing some playmakers, the best way to try to help and build confidence for some of the other guys that are filling in is utilizing tempo. And what tempo does is it kind of catches the defense off guard a little bit, especially when you're not anticipating tempo. If you go back to the first meeting against Pittsburgh and Baltimore, Pittsburgh huddle, they did things the normal way. So 9 times out of 10, as game prep for this week, they're preparing for the same thing. But come out with a little different tempo. You know what I mean? No huddle, going fast, trying to jumpstart something that they were not able to prepare for. And maybe that can kind of get you in the right direction a step earlier than doing things the normal strategic way. Because they're not, to our point about them not having playmakers, it will surface in a game like this weekend. Because guess who Baltimore has? They got at least 3 playmakers. The quarterback, the running back, and if you want to choose either Mark Andrews or Zay Flowers, choose. And think about this too, guys. This is a serious game for Baltimore. They're attacking this game like it's a Super Bowl because of what happened the first meeting and them chasing the Pittsburgh Steelers. And guess what? If you're Baltimore, you're thinking like, yo, if we can take care of our business and come out with a sense of urgency and beat Pittsburgh, guess who Pittsburgh got next week, Christmas? Kansas City. So you can go from a moment of chasing the Pittsburgh Steelers to basically winning the division and guaranteeing yourself a home game. So this is the most critical game for the Baltimore Ravens. So for me, Pittsburgh-wise, you have to match the level of intensity and preparation. So me, knowing that you don't have playmakers like they have on their offense, I got to try to switch up my scheme a little bit, and let's hit them with a little bit of tempo. Russ, go ahead, hit with rhythm throws, kind of get your guys going, and then get the running game going. That would be my philosophy.
Yeah, B-Mac, the rhythm throws, that's where we're going to have to see Russell Wilson really shine. And we alluded to how perfect he's going to have to be with his accuracy, with his timing, and his anticipation. But, Mike, to answer your question, I think that Russell Wilson has done a really good job this year, all things considered, age, all that kind of thing, being mobile in the pocket. Granted, it's not the same Russell Wilson we're used to. His ability to get outside, break, contain, and make plays has been awesome. But the question that remains, are we going to see the floor or some mid-level of the building that the offense is? Because we know what the ceiling is with George Pickens. Throw the football down the field. Without him, it's going to be Russell Wilson scrambling his butt off back there, trying to find a guy, not getting plastered at the second level. And with the way the Ravens defense has come along, I don't think it spells anything successful for the Steelers offense.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I agree with B-Mac's point, though. I think this has to be treated like a playoff game. You are 10-4 right now. Ravens are nipping on your heels at 9-5. It ain't getting any easier after this. And I just don't see how you can get through the wild card in the AFC right now. The top of that conference is too good, going on the road for 3 games to get to the Super Bowl. That home field advantage, at least for 1 game, is going to be so massive for whoever gets it. So, yeah, you have to pull out all the stops in this one if you're Arthur Smith and the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, we're going to take a quick break. After that, going to get to another AFC possible playoff matchup. Texans, Chiefs, right after this. The Texans travel to Arrowhead this Saturday as they face the reigning champs, 2-time reigning champs, Kansas City Chiefs, in a battle of 2 first-place teams in their respective divisions. I think they're both actually already clinched their respective divisions. So there's not actually a ton on the line for this one, because if the Chiefs lose, they still have the 1 seed. If the Texans lose, they are still the 4 seed. But obviously, we're going to get a nice handle on where these teams stack up in that conference. Kyle, I'm going to start with you on this one. What matchup are you looking forward to the most?
Well, you got to have a plan if you're any defense and you're playing against one of the greatest of all time. And regardless if Patrick Mahomes has spats on both of his ankles, he's still the most dangerous guy out there. And I know for a fact that in that Houston defensive meeting room, they're not believing anything that they've read, because after Patrick Mahomes left the field with an apparent ankle injury, I heard all these aggregate accounts talking week to week. It could be a month-long injury. Well, Patrick Mahomes just absolutely spits in the face of those guys. Full participant this week in practice. And I know that he's got a chip on his shoulder anytime he plays against another quarterback that people consider elite. And CJ Stroud being on the Houston Texans means Patrick Mahomes woke up with a little fiery hair on his butt. I know that competitive nature he has. So for the Texans defense, you have to find a way to pressure him early and often. With Joe Thuney moving to the left tackle position, that means what, Mike? There is a left guard that's not an all-pro anymore. I fully anticipate them to test out that interior three. I've talked about how dominant from Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, that inside of the Chiefs offensive line has been. They haven't been as dominant recently. And, I got to call my boys and call them out, challenge them. We're getting to the winter months here. It's cold. You can't allow your guy who, albeit indestructible, he's a bit hobbled. You can't let him feel that early, because as a quarterback, I would imagine if you get hit early, you're thinking about that for the remainder of the game. If I'm a guard and I get my hand swiped, all I'm thinking about for the next 4 quarters is do not get your hand swiped. And for a quarterback, if you get hit early and often, you're going to be thinking about it the whole day. So for the Texans defense, find a way to generate some of these pressures early and often. I don't care if you take one of your coverage elements and throw him in there. Send an extra guy, make Patrick feel the heat early. I think that's going to be the matchup to watch. Do the Texans have a great rush plan to get after Patrick and get him off rhythm and out of his schedule?
Yeah, in the words of the great American philosopher Lil Wayne, even when a wolf cries, you still can see its teeth. Meaning, yes, they're vulnerable, they're still deadly. And that's the issue with Pat Mahomes. So everything you mentioned, Kyle, with him having an ankle ailment, he's shown all of us in years past, even when he's hurt, he is still deadly. And you need to attack him as such. And I'm right there with you in things that I'm watching, because we know if he plays, he's nowhere close to being 80%, better yet 100%. But if you go out and you think because that wolf is crying, you still can't see his teeth, he will bite your head off. So can the Houston Texans do what they've been doing the entire year to every quarterback they face and putting relentless pressure on those said quarterbacks? Danielle Hunter has been one of the bigger signings for this team outside of Joe Mixon. He's second in the National Football League in sacks. 12 sacks. As a defense, because of how good Danielle Hunter has been, they're number 2 in the National Football League in team sacks, right? So they've done a great job in doing what? Putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And because of the pressure they've been putting on quarterbacks, the guys in the back end like Derek Stingley and Bullock, they've been able to get turnovers, interceptions. So if they can put pressure on Pat Mahomes, especially with him being a bit wounded, there lies the opportunity for them to do what they've been doing the entire season and give their offense and CJ Stroud extra possessions. But if they go out and they attack Pat Mahomes like, oh, you know what? He's wounded. He's crying. He's not feeling good. You're going to see them teeth. And by the time you see them teeth, it's too late to move. He got you right in the clamps of his jaw. So that's what I'm watching.
That's why I think in this game, the single most important player on the football field is Xavier Worthy, because we saw the graphic that was just on the screen there. Texans, lowest completion percentage allowed in the NFL this season. They don't make it easy to do what the Chiefs do, which is run, convert third down, run, convert third down. They don't give you those easy 5-6 yard gains that the Chiefs passing offense has been thriving on. They make it tough. But what they do give up is the explosive plays more often than not. They have a rookie safety in Kalen Bullock, who's given up a handful of busted coverages on the back end. They are not the most sound at that position. And what that tells me is Xavier Worthy, who Pat Mahomes has missed probably more times than he'd care to admit this season, because he is a guy with his 4.21 speed that has translated on those deep passes. He can give you those explosive plays. And now he's butchered a few of them himself. But if they can get on the same page at least once, hopefully twice, I think that's the difference, because it ain't going to be a CJ Stroud, Pat Mahomes shootout. That's not the kind of game I predict we'll see in this game. I predict a low scoring game. And with that being said, the 1 to 2 big plays, those will be the ones that change the game. Whoever can make them is, I think, the team that comes out on top.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up Xavier Worthy, because what has been the issue? We said the 4.21 speed is just too damn fast. And when you throw these balls to him outside the numbers, he's so fast when he's tracking the football, he loses sight of where he is on the football field. He stepped out of bounds a number of times before getting 2 feet down. I think if I'm Matt Nagy, I'm Andy Reid, anything that I scheme up for Xavier Worthy, it's double moves that end up over the middle of the field. I want to see him get targets between the hashes, because the only out of bounds you're going to do, you're going to be out of the playing field and in the end zone when you throw it to the middle of the field with Patrick Mahomes. I love that from you, Mike.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Hollywood Brown will be activated for this ball game, correct?
Yeah, we
Correct.
saw some clock emojis on the timeline, B-Mac.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's a hint, like, I'll be back. And if that's the case, he could be a huge addition for their offense in terms of what you talked about with Xavier Worthy. We've seen some good things from Juju Smith-Schuster here or there, but clearly they're lacking depth at the wide receiver position, not to mention experience, right? Because that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy in Xavier Worthy to kind of be your wide receiver 1/2, depending on what you're getting from D-Hop. But if you can get Hollywood Brown back to some capacity, maybe on a pitch count, but just understanding his athleticism and his speed and his experience, that can help the entire offense out. So we got to wait and see. But if he's able to return, that should be a plus for Pat Mahomes.
Oh, 100%. And if he does, if I'm Andy Reid, I'm just I am scheming up play action deep shots till the cows come home. I'm not trying to force those guys underneath targets. I want those big plays down the football field because that's what they can provide. And because when I go max pro up front, that gives me help with Danielle Hunter, gives me help with Will Anderson. And I'm not putting my tackles there on an island against probably the best edge rushing duo in the NFL. But the Chiefs aren't the only ones who have some O-line issues. The Texans on the opposite side of the ball are going to have a whale of a time trying to pass protect against Chris Jones because, well, they've had a whale of a time trying to pass protect against anyone this season, especially on that interior. Kyle, how do we foresee this matchup going for this Texans offensive front?
Well, let me just tell you this. When you play against number 95, it's never going to be as you envisioned when you do your meditations and your visualization Saturday night in the hotel room. You might say, I'm going to get my right hand in on the V of his neck, and then I'm going to get my left hand to follow underneath. I'm going to have great leverage. I'm going to hop, and stop that big old son of a buck. Well, that just ain't the case. So I'm going to be having my eyes on the line of scrimmage right there, number 95 against whoever. And the guy plays the piano. So if he smells fish, he's going to the market. He wants to eat. He's pescatarian mode. That's the way Chris Jones likes to rush the passer. He finds a guy that he likes the matchup, and he's going to get it until they prove to him that the scheme can cover him up. Also, we talk about getting after guys and DeMeco Ryans and the things he likes to do to frustrate quarterbacks from his defensive side of the ball. Don't forget that Steve Spagnuolo exists on this Kansas City Chiefs staff, and that guy loves some exotic stuff. He loves for that offensive line to have a lot to look at. He likes to create that paralysis by analysis pre-snap, and that's what I fully anticipate to happen. I anticipate a lot of bodies around quarterbacks in this game, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or CJ Stroud. That's what it's going to be, pressures, and it's going to be one-on-one winners with Chris Jones when he does get the luxury of being blocked one-on-one.
Yeah, Chris Jones is the one defensive rusher on the Chiefs. He has no assigned seat. He can sit anywhere in the classroom, meaning he can move anywhere on the defensive line based on the matchup that he would like to try to exploit for that said play. And to your point, you have to know where 95 is because he can line up at the 3, the 5. It doesn't matter at any given time. And he has that free range in their offense. But if you're Coach Spagnuolo as well, the issue for their defense has been coverage. We haven't seen the sticky-like coverage that we've grown accustomed to seeing, especially when they're sending these zero-like blitz concepts. So there's been some opportunities against the Kansas City Chiefs secondary. And if this is the game you do not want to be in your bag if you're Kansas City in the defensive secondary, because Nico Collins is a proven wide receiver 1. Nico Collins can take over a ball game, and there will be one-on-one opportunities for Nico because we know Spags will send pressure, especially as they get closer to the red zone. He does not like allowing quarterbacks to sit and go through their progression. Can the guys in the back end hold up just long enough for their rushers to be disruptive against C.J. Stroud? Because if they do not, I like any matchup for Nico Collins in the secondary for Kansas City based on what he's been able to do this season when healthy.
I do think that the Texans being able to pick up blitzes is the story of this one. It has to be. They've been so bad at it all year long. And Steve Spagnuolo is so good at targeting your weaknesses with those. And they have a guy in Leo Chanel who's one of the best blitzing off-ball linebackers in the NFL, who's basically like a defensive end on the second level of your defense. So if those get home, I think the Chiefs win this game. If the Texans are able to pick them up, like you said, Nico Collins, they don't have the corners to stick with him for longer than a second and a half, 2 seconds before that blitz. If it doesn't get home in that time span, he's going to be getting open. So going to be a fun one to watch. We got another fun one to watch in the NFC East. Commanders, Eagles. We teased it at the beginning of the show with Kyle's bold prediction. Saquon going for 175. We're going to get through all the matchups that are going to decide that game right after this. Commanders at Eagles this weekend. A lot on the line for the Eagles. The 1 seed still very much in play with all those 12-2 teams at the top. And for the Commanders, well, they need a couple more wins to secure that final wild card in the NFC. And it's the big matchup we touched on off the top, fellas. It's Saquon Barkley against this Commanders run defense. That's what decided it the last time around. Do we see the Commanders having more answers if that's Jonathan Allen being healthy, if that's their pass coverage being better, that they can dedicate more resources to the run defense? Kyle, how do we see this one faring? Obviously, I know you said off the top, 175 for Saquon, but do we think the Commanders have any chance of bettering their run defense this week?
You know what, Mike? Regardless if the Trojan Army rolls out there against this guy, number 26, or the Washington Commanders defense, who are more than likely going to be without their star defensive lineman, Jonathan Allen, I think that Saquon Barkley's going to eat. He's going to go out there. He's going to have a barbecue in the town where they used to house the Hogs in Washington. I really feel that way. And it all is because of that offensive line. They have been so fantastic this whole season. And you add to that the cherry on top is Saquon Barkley. I feel like regardless of who you roll out there in front of him, they are going to have the ability to get explosives out of the run game, which is a rarity in the NFL because an explosive play is dependent on 2 things. Number one, getting hats on at hats, being armless from the back, like Harry Heastan used to talk about, 5 guys moving, 5 guys or 4 guys against their will. I think the double teams, the point of attack, are going to be huge in this football game. And you want to watch, it's like going to the, you ever go build a sandcastle at the beach and you just know that wave's going to come in the next couple seconds and knock down your sandcastle? That's what standing up to a double team against the Philadelphia Eagles is like. There will be no sandcastle at the end of this play. We're going to hurry up and build this thing as quickly and acutely as possible. Saquon's going to have a huge day. And if Jonathan Allen's back in there, I know that Eagles group is going to test the recovery of that surgery he had.
Yeah, I'm with you,
For
Kyle.
me,
I just don't think that even with, sorry to be back. I was thinking, even with Jonathan Allen coming back, it's like this is your first game back, and this is who you got to face. 350 pounders double teaming you. It ain't the team I want to test my pec on. So, be back. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say I don't think the Commanders could be able to be successful against Saquon for 4 quarters. The thing that makes Saquon Barkley so special is because of how explosive he is, the speed. He can go a half with like 20 yards, and all that he needs is a glimmer of hope to be able to bring off a 5-yard run to 60. Remember what he did to the Rams? It wasn't like the Rams were just playing bad defense against him. No, they just could not play with the right gap integrity for 2 plays. And those 2 rushing plays, I think he roped off, 60 and 50. That's 110 yards. Estimate when you talk about what he exactly did on those touchdown runs. That's the thing that makes Saquon annoying as a defender. It's like when I was playing, we were going against Chris Johnson for the Tennessee Titans. I remember Dick LeBeau told us as we got ready for that ball game, he said, listen, I can care less what he has in terms of how good we're playing against him. Do not take your foot off the gas from the physical side of things and the intellectual side of things. Because if you give him one piece of hope, no one can catch him on our defense. And that's Saquon Barkley. Think about when Saquon Barkley gets a free range to get to the second level. When he does that, it's almost like you're holding your breath. Like, uh-oh, here you go. Because you don't see people go get him. He is that type of player. So for you guys in talking about the Commanders and the issues, I'm right there with you because, yeah, they might do a great job against Saquon for a quarter or 2 quarters or a half. But all he needs is just one little piece of light to be able to get through, and then he takes your whole heart out of your body, and you're like, here we go again.
Yo, it's like Devin Hester, Tavon Austin, Dante Hall, all these guys, special teams nightmares. It's the same thing with Saquon, but there is no special teams coach saying just kick it out of the end zone. You know that they're going to hand it to him. And just like on Devin Hester's cleats on the back, it said any time. Same thing with Saquon.
Kyle, I think you touched on this point a few weeks ago when you said, most running games in the NFL are utilized to like stay on schedule. They are to keep your offense and the chains moving. The Eagles, whereas the passing game is to get you those explosive plays down the field. The Eagles are stay on schedule and the explosive plays down the football field. Their running game is also a passing game and how it's utilized for that offense, which makes them just so terrifying for this Commanders and their run defense. All right, we're going to take a quick break. After that, going to get to the Thursday night football matchup, a battle between two current wildcard teams in the AFC, Broncos, Chargers, right after this. The 9-5 Denver Broncos travel to the 8-6 Los Angeles Chargers in a game with big wild card implications. I think both teams obviously not quite have locked in their playoff spots, but are on the precipice of doing so. Chargers 2.5-point favorites at home in this one. BMAC, I'm going to start with you. How do you see this game playing out?
Well, for me, I see this game playing out in terms of the Denver Broncos continuing what they've been doing in this 4-game winning streak, which is finding a way to win. The one bright spot from what I watched with the Denver Broncos last week, even though their rookie quarterback played like a rookie, 3 interceptions, didn't really see the football field well, but they still found a way to win. That's very, very encouraging because I do not expect to see that Bo Nix surface more so than not, right? I think he get back to being the efficient Bo, the guy that was a playmaker for this offense, and that helps their chances in tonight's matchup. Not to mention, when you look at the Chargers, guys, the issue for me offensively with the Chargers, in their last 3 ball games in which they are 1-2 in those last 3 ball games, their offense have been stagnant at best, right? The last 2 games against Kansas City and Tampa, their offense only scored 17 points. The game before that, in a win against the Atlanta Falcons, their offense only scored 10 points. Remember, Kirk Cousins threw a pick 6. So you're talking about a 3-game stretch. Offensively, you haven't been explosive. You know why? They lack playmakers. J.K. Dobbins was their best playmaker. He was the guy that was getting things going, especially in the running game. Remember how they started this season, playing great football on the defensive side, running the football well. J.K. Dobbins was running off splash-like runs of 20 yards or more. But not having J.K. Dobbins in the lineup clearly takes away from the playmaking ability of their offense, and that has really hurt them in the last 3 ball games. So I think those issues will once again arise because last time I checked, J.K. Dobbins isn't back. They haven't found a way to run the football. They don't know who actually is the featured running back for the running game. That hurts, and it puts more pressure on Justin Herbert. And outside of Ladd McConkey, I don't know if there's another pass catcher on their offense that we all would say, I trust him. That's a concern.
There's 2 things I got to keep my eye on here, Mike. And for the Denver Broncos, it's going to be Bo Nix's ability to take care of the football and the ability to develop that short-term amnesia. He's got to put yesterday behind him, move on to today. It's going to be a little bit sloppy. These Thursday night games always tend to be. But on the Charger side of the field, that playmaker, Ladd McConkey, back out there for the Los Angeles Chargers. And I know that Justin Herbert isn't at full strength. I fully anticipate Ladd McConkey to get the football early and often. I love what you said about J.K. Dobbins. This football team started the season with an identity, smash mouth, an explosive runner. Now they don't have him. They've had to kind of shuffle, rebalance this offense. And with McConkey coming back, it's good news for the Chargers. But I'm in on the Broncos tonight, Mike.
I agree with the Broncos, Love. I just think, this Chargers offense, I don't see it improving anytime soon. They have a bunch of square pegs. They have a bunch of guys who are like role players, whether it's Quentin Johnson, who can really only be a yak weapon, whether it's even Ladd McConkey, who's still so limited by his size and play strength, whether it's Gus Edwards, who's just like a goal line back, but then they're trying to make him a guy that they run the offense through on like a 1st and 10. They just have mismatched pieces for the roles they're trying to play right now. And that doesn't bode well when you're playing a team like the Denver Broncos. There you have it. That's our show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, Pushing the Pile podcast, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Until then, keep pushing.